Grand Ayatollah Anthony Fauci, supreme leader of the cult of the Holy Lab Coat, has been busted lying to Congress yet again, and stop me if you've heard this song before because it's getting to be so overplayed. There have been reports that Stairway to Heaven actually blushed. This is at least the fourth independently verified instance of Fauci lying out his punk ass before the Senate Oversight Committee. And he was under oath for the last two of those because the Republicans on the committee, knowing that this sleazy little bastard was about to spend several hours gleefully saying things that are not true, with that smug, self-satisfied smirk on his face that seems to say, "I am above the law and not accountable to anyone for anything." They made sure he was sworn in prior to his last two appearances, which, as a matter of courtesy, that isn't normally done when heads of federal agencies testify in committee. The difference being, if he had lied to Congress while not under oath, which he of course did, it's still a violation of the law for which he can be, at least notionally, subject to legal recrimination. But lying to Congress when you've been sworn in is straight up felony perjury. And this guy is as guilty of it as a person can be of a thing. Reportedly, O.J. Simpson himself was heard to remark, "Wow, that little cracker is guilty as fuck." This time it was The Intercept that got hold of the receipts, 900 pages worth of them, which is good to see because The Intercept is one of those outlets, of which there are way too many, that's crossed over the Rubicon into being a clearinghouse for radical leftist propaganda rather than a journalistic operation. The Intercept, as you may remember, is the outlet that was founded by Glenn Greenwald, who was then, last year, unceremoniously thrown out of his own company, deplatformed from social media, and hounded all the way out of the country for not towing the establishment line on all things COVID-related. So it's nice to occasionally see real journalism still being done by places like that. And in a strangely ironic way, it lends even more credibility to a report like this latest one, wherein The Intercept, as a result of a Freedom of Information Act request, got hold of a full 900 pages of records from the NIH and the NIAID, whose contents established beyond any possible shadow of an inkling of a doubt that U.S. taxpayer funds absolutely were sent to the Wuhan Institute of Virology for the express purpose of performing gain-of-function research on bat coronaviruses. We already knew, and if you're a regular viewer of this program, some of this will be a rehash, so do bear with me, that China did not meet the minimum standard criteria for being allowed to build a biosecurity level 4 facility, that they had to get a special dispensation from a WHO select committee in order to be able to build it, and that Grand Ayatollah Anthony Fauci, surprise, surprise, is one of the people who sits on said committee. The only condition stipulated by the WHO for China to be able to build the Wuhan Institute was that they had to find an international partner, a country that is qualified to build and run such a biosecurity level 4 facility, which they found in the French, who assisted with the construction of the thing and some of the startup procedures, and who were supposed to be, under the conditions set forth in the WHO special dispensation, exercising daily, detailed oversight on all of the lab's operations. But in the event, at least according to reports, the French got really freaked out about this gain-of-function research that was taking place because this was incredibly dangerous stuff that was being done, and they didn't want any part of it. So they said, "The hell with this, we're out of here," except they probably said it in French. At that point, since China was no longer abiding or even pretending to abide by the conditions and the operating protocols by which they agreed to abide in order to be permitted to build the lab in the first place, it then was the job of the WHO to shut that facility down immediately. But Tony Fauci and his good buddy Tedros didn't seem bothered in the slightest. In fact, the only move that Fauci and Francis Collins made, who is the head of the NIH, was to send 60 million more of your taxpayer dollars over there to continue funding what were some of the most dangerous virological experiments ever done on this planet, which were being done in and by a country that was unqualified to conduct such research, in a lab they never should have been allowed to build, and without the international oversight under which they were supposed to be operating. Frankly, if I was Tony Fauci, I'd probably be lying too, because this story is about as damning a tale of bureaucratic recklessness as has ever been told. If he had an ounce of good judgment in that little hobbit-sized brain of his, if he didn't love the red light on a TV camera as much as Brian Stelter loves jelly donuts dipped in maple syrup, he would have quietly resigned sometime last year, legally changed his name, thrown away all of his electronic devices, and moved to a cabin in the woods somewhere on the Maine-Canada border. But I guess hubris is one hell of a drug, isn't it? Now, Tony Fauci has about as much ability to resist a TV camera as Joe Biden does to pass up the chance to sniff the hair of a comely young Lolita while eating an ice cream cone and watching his favorite episode of Murder, She Wrote. Because as his proven verified lies continue to pile up, as he continues to haunt the cable news airwaves all day, every day, making self-incriminating statement after self-incriminating statement, Fauci is only increasing the likelihood that his own death will happen in a federal prison cell, which, all things considered, it probably should. During his last appearance, a sworn-in appearance before the Oversight Committee, Senator Rand Paul, having first reminded him that it is a criminal act to lie before Congress, offered Fauci a fair opportunity to retract his previous statement from May, in which he flatly asserted that no U.S. taxpayer dollars whatsoever were used to finance gain-of-function research on bat coronaviruses at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And Fauci, egomaniacal and sociopathic right to the last, refused to take it. He chose to double down on the lie. He pointedly refused to retract his previous false statements, but he sure looked flustered while he was doing it. His finger was shaking when he pointed at Senator Paul. He was glancing down at his notes, which I still maintain is a really weird thing to do when someone has just called you a liar and you're defending your good name. And he engaged in what is probably his biggest tell of all, and it's the same tell that Andrew Cuomo has when he's lying. I would love to play poker with either of those idiots, because when they feel backed into a corner, like maybe they've been busted and are in danger of being exposed, that New York accent keeps getting dialed up until they each sound like they're paying homage to Joe Pesci's performance in My Cousin Vinny. Senator Paul, I have never lied to the Congress, and you ain't got no idea what yous are talking about. Hey, yo, Jimmy the Eagle, why don't yous hit the music now, paisan? From high atop these here battlements at the curmudgeon castle, where yous don't want us to make you swim with the fishes. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. I am your eponymous host and humble servant. So President Joe Biden's latest approval rating numbers are in. He's blown right past 40% and continues to fall faster than a lead balloon filled with concrete. There doesn't appear to be much chance of anything he can do to pull himself out of the current tailspin, and remarkably, he is still only 231 days into the first year of his first term. You remember back in 2017 when the fake news performance artists were falling all over each other trying to portray Trump as an historically unpopular president? Well, even with those same fake news media trying desperately to prop him up, even with the unconditional, irrational support of the denizens of America's intellectual short bus over on celebrity Twitter, even with the entire deep state mafia feverishly slathering lipstick on the pig that is his failed presidency, Joe is now 5 or 6 points below where Trump ever was at the lowest point of his presidency. And I think the events of yesterday offer a great microcosm of what kind of man and what kind of president Joe Biden really is. He was in suburban New Jersey talking some half-baked horse shit about climate change, because I guess that's the hill that the people who run his administration have decided is the best hill to die on, and presumably it's a hill that was once a pleasant natural setting, but which now they've blighted with a bunch of bat-chomping, bird-slicing eco-crucifixes. But there seems to be an unspoken awareness that Afghanistan, in addition to being the most disastrous foreign policy debacle by a major world power in well over a century, is also the biggest own goal by a first-year president in the entire history of the presidency. So they really, really desperately want you to forget about all that. They want you to move on from the fact that there are still thousands of U.S. citizens, including hundreds of women and children, trapped behind enemy lines, trying to avoid the Taliban death squads that are going door to door looking for Americans to kill and rape and dismember and kidnap, possibly all four, not necessarily in that order. They don't want you to know that our own State Department and our own Defense Department are actively interfering with the groups of private citizens who are trying to enter the country and rescue our people and risk their own lives doing the job which they, the U.S. government, have decided they can't be bothered doing. So they are furiously shuffling through the governmental junk drawer, trying to find any shiny object they can wave in your face to make you forget about all that. And they've decided the best option is climate change? Climate change. They want you to focus on the sun monster, rather than the welfare of your countrymen and women who are likely to be dragged into the Kabul soccer stadium and publicly executed starting any day now. Now, granted, for a few days there, they gave it the good old college try when they attempted to pivot to abortion, but when their buddies in the fake news media started actively celebrating Satanism as the last best hope for Texas abortionists, I think even the clueless, bumbling retards who run the Joe Biden administration must have realized, yeah, that's probably not the best look. So we better just go with the sun monster. So Joe's in New Jersey, and he's talking about how scary the sun monster is. And speaking of the sun monster, I think Joe's handlers don't realize what a terrible looking visual it is. But he's got those aviator sunglasses on, in addition to the stupid obedience muzzle, because he literally looks like a goddamn wax mannequin that's been left in the sun too long and is starting to melt. Which, I admit, he may actually be a wax mannequin, and I'm not sure we would be able to tell the difference, but it seems fairly certain that the mannequin would probably have a higher approval rating. So he's giving this stupid, cringe-inducingly awkward statement about the dangers of the terrible sun monster, how we have run out of time, how we're facing an existential crisis whose only possible solution is for us to give more money and more power to the most catastrophically inept administration in the history of administrative ineptitude. And somebody thought it would be a good idea for him to have a cheering section behind him. So he's got Cory Booker, the guy who proudly wears Joe's former mantle of dumbest son of a bitch in the U.S. Senate, and he's got crying Chuck Schumer, who's not even from New Jersey, but whatever. And he's got a few random congressmen and a few members of the public who probably appreciate the fact that they were forced to wear masks at this thing, so as to lessen the likelihood of being recognized. And as he's mumbling and slurring through this prepared statement, they're all pretending to be so excited and enthusiastic, like he's getting a bunch of hearty amens from the congregation. Yeah, Joe, you tell him, Joe. Build back better, baby. You'll kick that sun monster's ass, Joe. In an administration where embarrassing awkwardness is the central defining characteristic, this might have been the most embarrassingly awkward thing we have seen yet. It's the sort of thing you just want to turn away from, which I understand is an emotion being felt even by people inside the administration, for there was a report today out of Politico that quoted multiple White House staffers, anonymously of course, as saying that they watch President Biden's public statements either with the sound muted or they don't watch them at all, such as the anxiety they suffer in waiting for whatever stupid or incoherent or indefensible thing he is inevitably going to say, which I think begs the question, you went to work for Joe Biden and you couldn't tolerate public gaffes? Jesus Christ, people, do I need to remind you about the magic glowing rectangle in your pocket? Saying stupid, incoherent, indefensible things in public is the defining characteristic of Joe Biden's half-century-long career in national public office. I mean, what? You thought him becoming president at age 185 was going to magically transform him into a well-spoken statesman? This guy was in his prime 40 years ago, around the time your host was in second grade, and even back then, I could have told you that Joe Biden's predilection for saying stupid shit in public was the most famous thing about him. Why do you think Obama kept him locked in the basement of the Naval Observatory for weeks and months at a time when he was the vice president, because Joe Biden talking in public is a lose-lose situation. Why do you think his first run for the presidency ended with him getting busted for plagiarism? Hell, did you even know that when you agreed to go to work for him? Because that magic glowing rectangle in your pocket is a powerful tool. For the sake of your own mental health, I recommend using it more diligently the next time you're considering accepting a job from a guy whose most noteworthy traits are 1, being consistently defeated by his own teleprompter, and 2, being able to identify different brands of children's shampoo just by the aroma. Now, Joe could have called it a day at this point. He could have shuffled over and climbed into the presidential limo and been done with New Jersey. And it would have been an awkward, embarrassing day that did nothing to rescue his cratering approval rating. But all in all, in the entire decades-long pantheon of Joe Biden buffoonery, it would have been par for the course. Just another round of political golf in which he hit half a dozen tee shots into the woods, killed at least 2 spectators, got struck by lightning on the 17th green, and drowned his playing partners when he drove his golf cart into a lake. But our president decided his day's work was not yet at an end. Even though he'd been awake for nearly 5 hours, which in his book is quite a formidable feat of stamina, he decided to leave no doubt that he is a weakling and a coward, possessing not one scrap of moral courage or intellectual fortitude, who has about as much business being the president of the United States as Miley Cyrus does. You see, for some reason, which is unfathomable to me, Joe's people decided to do this appearance in a residential neighborhood in suburban New Jersey, where your average resident is not a leftist or a Democrat, certainly not a person who lives in fear of the sun monster, and who is overwhelmingly more likely to have voted for Donald Trump than for Joe Biden. So when Joe was doing this event, the people who live across the street were able to stand in their own front yards and to be clearly heard expressing their true feelings about Joe Biden and his shit show of a presidency. So they did, and they were. One guy yelled out that his best friend died in Afghanistan, and for what? For this guy to pull this shit? That's a direct quote, and it's also a perfectly fair question. One woman was heard to remark, "It's unbelievable what our country has become," and I say our country because I'm an immigrant, and this is my country. Again, this sounds to me like a perfectly fair assessment of the first 8 months of the Joe Biden presidency. Some of the other residents could be heard saying, "Biden, go home, you should resign, fucking tyrant, stop turning our country to shit, and go to bed, Sleepy Joe." If he was a real man or a real president, here's what Joe would have said. He would have said, "I realize not everyone agrees with me, but they are welcome to their opinions. It's a free country. That's what makes America great." But Joe Biden is not a real man, and he's not a real president. He is a gutless yellow turd. So his response, much like his response to most other things during his long and thoroughly undistinguished career in public office, was just to lie. First, he claimed the hecklers were just upset with his views on climate change, even though he knew damn well nobody had said one word about that subject, and his parting shot was to allege that the people shouting the criticism, they aren't really local residents. They were standing in their own front yards, you ridiculous fool. Your people chose to stage this event in their neighborhood, so they took the opportunity to tell you what they think of your failed presidency. And second of all, what the hell would it matter if they didn't really live in that neighborhood? Does that make their frustration with your failed policies any less real or any less valid? What the hell planet do you actually live on, Joe? I was reminded of the Stephanopoulos interview the other week when Joe, asked for his thoughts on the chaos at the airport that he himself had created, asked to comment on the fact that our withdrawal was such a disorderly debacle that people were hanging on to the outside of our aircraft and falling to their deaths. He tried to hand-wave it away with, "That was 4 or 5 days ago." Like that makes it any better or different? And it was a bald-faced lie anyway, so I suppose it's a moot point. That is your president, Mr. and Mrs. America. Congratulations, we've only got 3.5 more years of this shit left to go. Thanks for watching. See you Friday. Get off my lawn.